I looked at my watch. 7:55 p.m. My wife and her companion were due at the restaurant at 8 p.m. I had made a reservation in a booth in the back so I could see them enter, but they couldn't see me. I sipped my Diet Pepsi and looked around the room. It was crowded for a Saturday night. But the table he had booked was in the corner and away from the main area, but I could see it easily enough. My wife, Corinna, informed me that our former best friend David wanted to take her out to dinner. Apparently, he had fallen into a depression after his wife left him. She left him 6 months ago. Today is divorce day. Sarah, his wife of 15 years, hasn't told anyone yet why she divorced him. But my wife and I have our suspicions, but we can never prove it. So David called me and asked if I would be okay with him dating my wife. We have always been close. His wife and Corinna have always been best friends, ever since college where we all met. Over the years, we have always been close as a couple and regularly went out on company dates. Sarah is a beautiful woman and any man would want to be her husband, and our friends and family thought he knew he was lucky to have her, but looking back, David didn't always appreciate Sarah. She's tall, slender, with long, dark hair. She could have easily been a model, but instead she works as a personal assistant to her father who runs an accounting firm. Over the years, Corinna and I have noticed that Sarah puts up with a lot of things that most wives wouldn't. David is a handsome man. He is tall and well-built and works out regularly at the gym. My wife and I asked him and Sarah at various times about their relationship, but Sarah always replied that everything was fine and she was quite happy. We did not like David's behavior. One of those behaviors was that he flirted too much and belittled Sarah over nothing in front of friends. To be fair, yes, we were friends, but what couples do in private is their own business. So if Sarah had any problems in her marriage, we didn't know about it. In retrospect, I think it was a mistake not to investigate it further. It was only in the last couple years that Sarah started going out alone with my wife and me. David was usually too busy doing something else or working. He's a sales rep for a manufacturing company, so we enjoyed just the three of us. None of us have kids, so we can go wherever we want and whenever we want. Over the years, we have gone on vacations together, and until recently, we all had a great time. But on our last vacation to Scotland, David spent a lot of time working on his laptop or talking sales. It got to the point where I sat him down and told him to get his head out of his ass and pay attention to his wife, who, by the way, was getting a lot of attention from other men when we went out. My wife was getting a lot of attention from other men too, but she and I made it clear that we were a couple and she would not dance with anyone else or accept a drink from anyone else. Sarah stayed close to Corinna and I all night. After several nights of David acting like an asshole, my wife Sarah and I went out on him and told him that if he wasn't interested in being here, he could go home. He did leave the vacation right after Sarah and him had a big fight. That was a year ago, and things hadn't been good since. Corinne tried to get Sarah to open up and tell him what was going on in her marriage, but she always sadly said she was dealing with it and wasn't worried, that everything was fine. 6 months ago, Sarah filed for divorce, but never gave a reason why she filed for divorce. However, she said she would tell us all the details once she was divorced, and my wife and I guessed what her story would be, but she said she would tell us after the divorce. And so that evening came. My wife had just walked into the restaurant wearing the red mini dress I had given her for our 15th wedding anniversary. It fit her tall figure perfectly. Her long black hair was loose down her back, and the red high-heeled shoes made her look even taller than she was. The dress was my wife's idea. She wanted to say it was something you could never have. David was already sitting at the table waiting for my wife. He stood up when she froze for a moment and then walked over to the table. David tried to put his arm around her, but she pulled back, avoiding his kiss and hug. "Corinna, please, we're friends. We've been friends for a long time. Is one kiss going to hurt you?" He said in a soft voice, clearly trying to seduce. She looked at him with a sigh and turned her cheek to him. "Okay, David, if you insist," she said in an indifferent voice. He tried to put his arms around her again and turn her towards him, but she dodged easily and he finally pecked her cheek. Without waiting for him, she walked over to the other side of the table and sat down, and he remained standing, watching her. He tried to come to his senses and sat down across from my wife. "So, Corinna, you are very beautiful today. Your husband is lucky. I always thought you were too good for him, he said with a smile. I saw my wife's face change. She got angry. David, I only agreed to be here because I want to hear your version of why my best friend divorced you. Personally, I have no idea why she put up with you for so long. So tell me what's going on in your head, why you invited your ex-wife's best friend over for a night out. And for the record, that dress is not for you. It's for Gary. He'll get all the benefits of that dress later. He smirked. Corinna, my ex-wife has been working above her weight for years. I am a very successful sales rep. My bonuses helped us buy our beautiful home, her beautiful car. They helped pay for our group vacation. She gets everything she needs from me. Without me, your best friend is nothing. She will come crawling to me when she can't afford her lifestyle. My wife was definitely starting to get angry about his behavior. David, what happened to the person you used to be? You treated Sarah with respect. You were with her all the time. You were always the one who made sure she was okay and loved. What happened to you? David laughed. Your best friend got boring when we first met. We had all sorts of adventures. Did she ever tell you about the time we swapped partners with a few couples at clubs near here? No, she didn't tell us about that. Did she enjoy it? I can't imagine it was her idea, my wife said stiffly. No, it was my idea, and after some persuasion she agreed to try it, but only to make sure she didn't participate, and it went on for 3 weeks. The first time I think she liked it, but the second and third time not so much anymore. I think she wanted to stop, but I talked her into doing it again. Remember 6 months ago she wanted to spend the weekend with you and Gary and I couldn't make it? My wife nodded her head. She obviously couldn't speak, she was so angry. Well, I spent the weekend with a group of swingers. They wanted Sarah to be there too, but by then I was asleep on the couch. I knew that was the end of it for us. So on the last weekend I slept with a bunch of women. I got to the point where I didn't care if I had married women, and that's when my bitch wife served me papers. He said this with anger. Corinna took a deep breath. So why am I here? Why tell me this story? Because my beautiful dear friend, I want to go back to my ex-wife. I want to continue to have a lifestyle with her as my wife. But if I can't, I would really like to be with you for one night. Your husband doesn't need to know, and my ex-wife won't know either. At this point, my wife stood up and, as if on cue, said to David, David, please excuse me, I need to go to the bathroom. He stood up and said, Don't worry, I will order wine for both of us. I know you like Sauvignon Blanc wines. My wife turned around and said, Yes, that's fine, and walked away. David was looking over the wine menu and didn't notice me sitting in my wife's seat. It took a few moments before he looked up, a look of surprise on his face. Gary, good to see you. You know your wife looks beautiful tonight. My eyes didn't take my eyes off his. Yes, my wife is very beautiful. She will always be beautiful to me, just like your ex-wife will always be beautiful. And trust me, she will find someone much better than an asshole like you. Fuck off, Gary. You know I would sleep with your wife someday too. You know she likes me. Over the years, I could sleep with her whenever I wanted. Sarah was always worried that I was going to fuck her best friend. The only reason I didn't try to fuck your wife was because I liked you too much as a friend. Of course, that stopped last year. You see, I had an epiphany, looked around and realized that sex with my wife wasn't satisfying me like it should, so I convinced my wife to have fun with other men. Don't be surprised that everyone is swinging or swapping these days. I can't believe you're the same man Sarah, me, and Corinne knew back in college. Sarah loves you, you idiot. She obviously didn't notice your flaws and stayed with you. I really don't understand how you could separate her or let someone else have sex with her, so why did she stop swinging? I said, feeling very sad for a friend I once knew. Well, apparently sex with other people isn't her thing, and honestly, I only brought her along to practice. Between you and me, I've had plenty of sex with married women who need extra sex. Mostly their husbands don't satisfy them. Too bad your wife always told Sarah that you always satisfy her. Otherwise, I would have really entertained her sooner. He was really proud of himself. What an asshole my former friend had turned into. Okay, if you've completely lost your mind, you're probably wondering why I'm here and not you pouring out your obviously broken heart to my kind-hearted wife. He thought for a moment and looked around. Where's your wife? She said she was going to the bathroom. No, she's not in the restroom. She's on her way home to be with your ex-wife. They're going to share a bottle of champagne and celebrate the end of your marriage. Sarah will never go back to you. My wife and I will make sure you never hurt her again." Seriously, David, you need help. You shouldn't pry into other people's feelings. If you needed the extra sex, why the hell didn't you just leave Sarah? You already told me that she hated him and only did it to stay with you. That totally sucks. Look, Gary, I love Sarah, don't laugh. But I need more from her and she won't give it to me. That's why I'm in a swingers group right now who have fun at parties, and I'm sure they'll accept you if you want to join me with Corinna. David, listen. I don't sleep with anyone but my wife. She's not going to sleep with you or anyone else. Just so you understand, if you come near my wife, you will regret it. If you try to contact your ex-wife, you will regret it. You remember all those times I kicked your ass when we were younger. So here, I'm a lot stronger than I was, and trust me, you don't want to see me lose my cool. For a moment, I thought he was going to get up and hit me, but he changed his mind. Gary, you're pathetic. Your wife has you by the balls, she bosses you around, and I'm now free to have fun with whoever I want to have fun with. For your information, I love married women, and your wife is at the top of my list for the future. You better watch out for her. He said this with a smug smile. When I got up to leave a message, I got a picture on my phone. My wife and Sarah stripped down to sexy lingerie. They were hugging each other and drinking a glass of champagne. The text read, "Hurry home, my love. We're waiting for you. Love you. Sarah says she loves you too. Say hi to that asshole." David, I think this message is for you. I turned the receiver and he looked at it, blushing brightly with anger. Gary, you asshole. I'll get them both, I swear. And then I'll get you too. He started to move towards me. Understand, he and I are about the same height and weight, but I work out twice a week. My work involves my arms, and I'm trim, and strong. David is a few pounds bigger and obviously not as strong. In a fight, I'd win, but he hasn't tried to fight me in years. I just pushed him back in his chair, then reached for my jacket, put some papers on the table, and said, "This is a restraining order. It separates you 500 meters away from Sarah and my wife, and from any friends or family you may try to talk to. Any belongings you have left in the old house will be sold, or you can take them back at will." Fuck you, Gary. I'll do whatever I want, and mark my words, I'll get your wife. No, David, you won't. Just go on living a life of mindless sex and swinging, enjoy all the STDs you can find. You're dead to me, your ex-wife and my wife. And don't worry, your ex-wife will be much better off without you. Goodbye, David. With those words, I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't hear footsteps until it was too late. I swung my fist and hit him in the nose. It broke when my hand made contact with it. He fell down holding his face. Several waiters tried to help him up, but he was swearing and yelling at me. One of the waiters used his phone and contacted the police. The cops pulled up and saw me leaning against the car, and I explained to them what had happened. They turned their attention to David. The sergeant took David by the arm, pulled him aside, and explained to him what he needed to hear. Unfortunately, David was not himself and lunged at the police officer. He was later charged with attempting to injure a police officer. I was admonished, but not charged. I drove home, and when I opened the door, there were two very beautiful women waiting for me. Both hugged me. Sarah, now dressed in flannel pajamas, kissed me on the cheek and then handed me a glass of champagne. My wife, still dressed in sexy lingerie, kissed me on the lips, then kissed Sarah on the cheek. We both said goodnight to Sarah and retired to our room. My wife and I made love, slowly, gently, and very pleasantly. Life is good. Our once friend is going to be in big trouble, and Sarah is free to live her life the way she wants. Yes, she is talking to a psychiatrist about how she let David run her life. But for now, she lives with us. And in case you're wondering, my wife has been writing down everything David says. It may not be applicable in court, but it gives us bargaining power, which was the whole point of the evening. And, of course, to piss David off. Epilogue. Sarah hasn't moved out of our house. We haven't dated. We're strictly platonic best friends who love each other. Yes, Sarah goes on dates. Sometimes we go out with her, sometimes we double date. But ultimately, Sarah doesn't trust anyone but me and my wife. She told us how the past year has affected her. David was just as we thought he was, a good, loving, and caring husband. Until 5 years ago, for no apparent reason, He became very jealous of her and my wife and me. Over time, he tried to forbid her from seeing us, but when she refused, he began to find excuses not to be with us and was seeing more and more of his friends and co-workers. It got to the point where he started staying out all night. Without explanation, he worked longer hours than ours and pretty much ignored her. And when he was with her, he acted abusive, and this led him to the idea of switching places. At first, she didn't want to do it, but the abuse got worse, escalating to physical and mental abuse. Like many other victims, she agreed to it to appease him. The problem was that the men she was having sex with were complaining that she was like a robot and getting no satisfaction from her. So the group asked David to stop bringing her in, even though by this point Sarah was fed up and talking to a divorce lawyer. Sarah was smart enough to install cameras all over the house, and the case was open and shut. The judge awarded Sarah almost everything and also ordered the police to investigate the abuse. Apparently, the police were looking for David to question him about the abuse allegations. Apparently, when the police learned of the incident at the restaurant, he was prosecuted and is now serving at least 9 years for battery, assault, criminal damage, stalking, and drugging Sarah. The list of charges is getting longer and longer. Apparently, he has lost his job and will be homeless when or if he is released. Sarah confessed to Corinna and I all about her marriage and how she hates herself for letting David do what he did to her and hates herself even more for letting 2 men sleep with her. She was actually drunk and suspects David drugged her when she did it, but it was the only way she could go about it. After the second time, she told David she was leaving him. I remember the day she showed up at our house with 3 suitcases and tears streaming down her beautiful face. She told us about her life, which she had kept secret until now. At first, I wanted to find David and beat him to a pulp, but the women talked me out of it. Karma will get David. But for now, life is good. I have a beautiful wife and a wonderful best friend to keep me company.